We talk about what's happening now with COVID-19 pandemic. Everyone is looking back in time to the 1918 flu pandemic. And one of those historians who's doing it is Tim Kiska. He's joining me now. He's also a professor at the University of Michigan Dearborn, longtime reporter and writer for the newspapers here in town. Hi, Tim. How are you?
Pretty good, Christy. How are you?
Good, good. Talk to me a little bit about the podcast that you did here, the Detroit History Podcast you've been doing for a while, but you specifically look back now at the 1918 flu pandemic and really what happened in Detroit and the waves that came after. Go ahead and tell me about when you first started thinking, this is what I'm going to delve into and do a podcast on this.
Well, I had in my files, some old clips from 1918, 1919 describing these horrific problems where Ford Motor Company was literally loaning out cars because there weren't enough ambulances. And it sort of sat in my files for probably 5 years. This thing hits, and I thought, wait a minute, we've been to this dance, unfortunately, before. So I wanted to find out what happened in 1918, 1919, 1920. How did we react, but what did we learn from that? And the world was obviously way different in those years. But still, I wanted to find out what happened exactly. How did that roll out in this town?
So you took how many weeks did it take you? And then what are the sources that you went to?
Probably roughly about a month. The sources, I have a fistful of old City of Detroit Health Department bulletins where they recorded some of this stuff. I was looking at old Detroit Free Presses, old Detroit Newses. I interviewed a guy named J. Alex Navarro, who's a medical historian out of the University of Michigan, excellent, and also a guy named Matthew Daly out of Grand Valley State University, who's been looking at this for years and years and years with his class. And I also had this reporter, Christy McDonald, taking me through and reading through the archives. I mean, actually reading what was in the newspaper at that time.
Yeah, I was able to help voice some of those things as well. And our One Detroit senior producer, Bill Kubota, works with you on these podcasts as well, right?
That's right.
So when you started to take a look, and again, our world is very different in terms of contagion, in terms of the ability that we have to be able to get around the world and the spread of a pandemic. But what kind of parallels did you find between what happened in 1918 and then the 2 years following and kind of where we are now?
Well, one thing that struck me was at one point, it started getting really bad. We're talking about October 1918. And the governor, Albert Sleeper, is seeing, oh my God, this is spreading everywhere. So he's thinking, we got to close this place down. And there was all kinds of pushback from people for a variety of different reasons. One, James Inches, who's the City of Detroit Health Department chief, was saying, wait a minute, this is going to, if we close everything down, there's going to be hysteria. So there was a closure from about October 19th to November 2nd, but people went out in the streets in massive numbers, particularly right after Armistice Day, the day after Armistice Day, November 12th, again, a little later in the month at a Thanksgiving parade, and people got really sick in massive numbers. We're talking in that wave, 1,800 dead. And by the way, that number might be even a little low, because if somebody came in, when you read these health department bulletins, they say flat out, somebody comes wheeled into the emergency room, they've got cancer and the Spanish flu, they die, they're written off as a cancer death. Why? I don't know, but so the numbers are probably higher.
I think what's really interesting that you looked at was the different waves, because we are in what we can only assume is the first wave of COVID-19. That, the experts are looking out saying, look, if we don't take in certain accounts, there is going to be a second wave. It's just going to be a matter of what that looks like.
Yes, and sad but true. And as we mentioned, there were 4 different waves here. There was one in the spring of 1918, another heavy one in the fall of 1918, another one in 1919. The final one was January 20th. So do the math. We're talking a year, 3 months, a year, 4 months later. And what Navarro, who's an expert at this thing, says, what it does is it goes away for a little while and then it comes back. And a lot of people are immune, so they don't get sick. But a lot of people aren't immune and they get sick. And it keeps going and it keeps on going until it finally just sort of another strain comes in and kind of bumps that out, unfortunately.
I think what's interesting is you're not the only one who's looking back in history and the reactions of the time during a pandemic. You had also referenced that the LA Times had done something taking a look at how Los Angeles reacted in San Francisco, and really the tale of two cities when people were very extreme and shutting things down, and one city that did not.
Yeah, exactly. And in the pushback, you get that. I totally understand it, because you've got people. The place, the deli where I get my corned beef sandwiches. I don't know, for sure, but these people have been working for decades upon decades, to build that business up and do a good business, and then poof, it's melting away before their eyes. So you can see why people are really anxious to get back. It's totally understandable. On the other hand, what you learn from the Spanish flu, and God knows medicine's a lot better, a lot different, but those are the realities right there, as they were 100 years ago.